This is Have You Met? My guest today is a primatologist, conservation scientist, anthropologist, and field biologist. He's a director of the long-term Kibale Monkey Project in Uganda, founded in 1989. The project focuses on primate ecology and conservation, amongst lots of other things, including the union of local healthcare and conservation. He established a clinic in Kibale to treat the health needs of the local people. He even imported an ambulance from Canada. We talk about all things nature, ecology, the environment, conservation, and he shares some of his more memorable interactions with primates and other wildlife. Have you met Colin Chapman? So, Colin, tell me a bit about your early life and how it set you on course to work with primates and work in Uganda.
Okay. Well, in many ways, it's rather difficult to say. Basically, I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, which is kind of the largest most northern city in Canada. So I'm a tropical biologist, so I went a long way from home. My father was a businessman, didn't really appreciate nature, but I just always loved watching animals. And so from the very beginning, I kind of loved just watching animals, kind of following in the backyard. But those are, I think, just the squirrels. And my father tells a story about the first time we were playing Scrabble. We spelled biology. And I said, that's what I want to do. And I don't know how old it was. I couldn't spell the words, so it must have been early. And basically just went on from there. I just kept on going. Wow. I just love what I do, and I just keep on doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. So you always loved animals from as long as you can remember.
Yeah.
And your dad was not a nature guy, not an animal guy.
He was a businessman. He sold suits.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
and Edmonton is a cold city. It's got I have a plaque that says I lived through a month of -40. So
wow.
It's a cold city.
Do you have moose up there?
We have moose, yeah.
Did you see any when you were young?
Oh yeah, sure. We'd go out of the town, and you basically we did winter camping, and there were wolves going around the tent at night. So.
Oh, crazy! Wow. Have you ever seen a wolf up close when you were there? Like without the tent in between?
Well, yes, but still like 50 meters. But.
Yeah. Wow. That must have been terrifying when they're circling your tent. Are they circling, or am I exaggerating now?
They were circling, but I was sleeping through it. So I just looked at the tracks in the morning. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's crazy. That's crazy. And so how did you take it from passion to profession, I guess, for want of a better word?
I kind of took the typical routes that most people do. I said, okay, I want to watch animals. How do I do this? And I went into a biology degree for an undergrad. And then I just kept on going. I moved to primates because they're so fun to watch. And so I did an undergrad in zoology and then did a master's in anthropology, which is kind of anthropology is interested in the study of primates to look at human behavior. Mm-hmm. And then I did a PhD in combined anthropology and biology. Then I did a postdoc in biology and then a postdoc in anthropology. I just kind of kept on going the academic route.
Yeah. Wow.
But academia is great because it gives you tons of freedom. You can go to the field for a year and just kind of, in some senses, do what you want. Get to watch animals. So.
It can't be that easy for everybody, though, to get out to the field, can it? Or is that as available, that kind of opportunity?
It's you got to work at it. You got to find the grant money, and so I made it sound easy, but it took a lot of hard work to get there. But.
Yeah. If you had to define yourself, like in terms of all those, not yourself, professionally, like all those titles and things like that, how would you kind of sum it up if you had to into a short, succinct?
It's really hard because I've done so many different things and I enjoy so many different things. Now what I'd say is I'm a conservation biologist because I've kind of emphasized more of the conservation side of my research. But, I'm an anthropologist, I'm a biologist, but I call myself a conservation biologist most of the time now.
Okay, cool. And how did Uganda first come about? How did that first get on your radar?
Mm-hmm. Well, people always think that I'm going to give some sort of logical, nice academic, professorial reason why I went to Uganda. The reality is I finished a postdoc at McGill University, and I was basically looking at the next step. And I wrote 6 different grants to do another postdoc. And the one that was for Uganda came through. And so that's where I went. So it wasn't very well planned. It was just where life took me.
Yeah. So you would have been happy to go pretty much anywhere at that point.
Yeah, at that point, I didn't have a job, didn't have a salary. So whichever of those 6 came through, I would have done. I didn't know what I'd do if one of those didn't come through.
And what was the first thing when you first got there? What were you doing?
I was studying chimps. So that was
In
basically
there.
in the wild.
Yeah.
So I went to a place called Kibale National Park, which is in the west of Uganda, basically in the foothills of the Rwenzori Mountains. So on a cold, kind of rainy season day, you see snow on the tops of the Rwenzoris.
Wow.
And I went there to work on chimps.
Amazing.
I spent
That's
3
cool.
years
So
doing that.
how hard is it to not like anthropomorphize? I'm pronouncing that horribly. How hard is it to not anthropomorphize? How hard is it to not anthropomorphize when you're working with chimps and watching primates in general?
Really hard, because you kind of get an intuition of why they're doing something, and you kind of in the back of your mind, that animal, oh man, he's just a mean one, and that one, oh, he's big, but he's just a teddy bear.
Yeah.
And so you totally have size. I can't say it either. So
it
you
must
totally
be one of the
So you totally anthropomorphize, but then you just don't publish it. You just kind of keep it out of your writing.
Yeah.
But
it must be such an easy trap to fall into. You must be constantly having to tell yourself, like, no, don't think like that.
Yeah.
Change that.
But it gives you insights. If anyone who kind of has a dog often knows what the dog's going to do next. So it kind of gives you insights. And you know what the dog wants and maybe why. You think similar ways. So it gives you insights. You just have to test those insights in a better way.
Yeah, that makes sense. So to go back to when you first kind of arrive in Uganda and you're in the field, in the forest, watching and studying these primates, kind of what were you looking for and what were you... Tell me more about the work you were doing exactly at that time.
Sure. Well, I'm kind of a rare breed of primatologist in the fact that I'm really interested in the ecology side and the behavior side. So what I was trying to figure out is chimpanzees have a very fluid social organization. Sometimes you'll find a group and it'll be 40 animals. That's pretty rare. Most of the time you find groups that are 5 to 10, and these kind of smaller groups or subgroups kind of join for a while and then split apart. So I was trying to understand what were the ecological reasons that kind of led to different group size in different times of the year.
Wow. What's the average? What's like a normal group, or is there no average?
There's an average. It's probably around just less than 10.
Okay. And that would be what kind of split of male, female, and things like that?
It depends on the season, depends on what they're feeding on. So, if the food is really abundant, everyone gets together. You find basically all the animals kind of congregate, particularly the males. And so all the males will be together. Mm-hmm. Some females will be in that big group when food's really abundant, but not all. Because the males tend to pick on the females. There's a lot of aggression. So a lot of the females will be more by themselves. But all the males will get together when food is really plentiful. If food's scarce, animals kind of divide up into 2s and 3s.
Is that like kind of them just thinking, on some level, it's not, we don't want to be fighting and stuff when we don't need to, when there's enough food to go around?
Yeah.
Why?
I think there's a general drive to be in a bigger group, particularly for the males. So they all try to get together. But if you're all together, then there's too much competition over food. If you're a low-ranking male and you're in a fig tree, the big males will just chase you out. They'll get no chance to feed. So you get into smaller groups when the food's not really abundant.
Wow. Okay. How long, like in total, have you spent studying these chimps and similar primates?
Well, chimps, I spent 3 years. Primates, no. I'm going to date myself. Something like 40 years. I started as an undergrad.
Yeah.
I studied a number of different species, but.
Okay. So the chimps were about 3 years. You were observing them for 3 years, like in the wild.
Yeah. About half the time I was in the field, half the time I was back at the universities.
How many groups, like over that 3 years, do you think you studied around where you in Kibale?
Well, there's one kind of social community So basically one group that was mostly habituated so that we could follow them. The other kind of neighboring groups, they weren't habituated. They weren't used to watching people following them. So they would, if you see one, they basically disappear. So basically I just studying one community, one group of animals. And, you know, I knew them. We had animals that you gave names to, light brown, stocky.
Yeah.
So
what kind of interactions did you have with them, if any? Like, I'm sure there were moments where you felt them looking at you or things like that.
Yep. You try not to interact with them because you don't want to alter their behavior. You want to study their natural behavior.
Mm-hmm.
But of course you do. That you will interact with them. So one example was, it was a rainy day and I was coming down a really steep hill following one of the big males. It was probably one of the biggest males. And I slipped and fell. And I tumbled down the hill and I hit him smack on. So I just plowed right into him, just rolling down the hill. And, I was going, okay, what's he going to do? Rip off my arms? What's going to happen here? And I was at one side of this, 1 meter wide trail, and here's the other side. And he kind of got up and shook himself, looked at me, and, I'm now anthropomorphizing, but he kind of looked kind of with this thing of contempt. You can't even walk down a hill. And he sauntered off. So that's one example, so you do interact.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. I bet you were terrified after you hit him, or I would have been anyway.
I was. Another time we had a young female chimpanzee that had been taken out of the community as a pet. So probably her mother was killed and she was a young female that was being kept as a pet. And the Park Service has confiscated the animal. So we checked her, make sure her health was okay. So she didn't have things like TB or anything like that she could get from people. And we tried to reintroduce her. And that was an interesting episode. So, she's kind of used to people. So I was basically walking up the hill with her holding her hand. So you're walking up the hill. And as the idea is, the field assistants were ahead of me with the group. And they were on a walkie-talkie. And they said, okay, you come towards us. And I was coming. But she got tired. And so I, encourage her to come along. But then basically she sat down and just started screaming. Like a baby throwing a temper tantrum. The big males heard and they came charging. And so for a good 10 minutes, they basically were in the forest. They would charge up this path. And I couldn't do anything. For one thing, she grabbed a hold of my leg and she was just basically holding on. So I couldn't run or do anything. So I just stood there. And the males would do these bluff charges, 10, 15 minutes. And then after that, one of the big males kind of sat down, and there were about maybe 5 males, just maybe 5 meters away. And the biggest male kind of inched toward me, stuck out his foot. She left my leg and ran over to him. And he just picked her up like a baby, which males don't do, put her to his chest and ran off. And I just wandered away the other direction.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Were you scared that time when they were doing the bluff charges, or nerves of steel by that point? No, not quite.
No, I was scared. Yeah.
Yeah. Have they ever kind of hurt somebody that was working with you or anything like that? Has there ever been like where it wasn't a bluff or something went wrong?
There have been with gorillas. There have been cases where gorillas have bitten people. There have been cases. There's been slaps, that sort of thing, but nothing big. There have been situations where chimpanzees basically go hunting, and most of the time they're eating fruits and leaves and herbaceous stuff, but they will hunt monkeys, and so they hunt small mammals, small deer, and a couple of times what they've done is they've gone out and they've been raiding people's crops. They've come across children. And so they've basically killed children. So there have been some really serious instances.
Yeah. Is that around like where you are? Is that happening?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's happened in a couple of places, but
yeah. That's an awful situation, isn't it? I mean, how do you even begin to deal with that? Because I guess you've got people that want blood at that
exactly.
point, and you have to try and kind of keep some order of peace, I suppose.
And
things like that.
Exactly. We're facing that now a lot with elephants coming out of the park I work in Kibale, because the elephants basically see great food just in the farmer's field, let's go eat some, bananas, or typically they go out for the bananas and they basically eat the whole banana stalk. And of course, the farmers are just, livid that, a group of 10 elephants coming in a small field will just trash it. So
I bet. But what do you want them to do? Is free bananas,
I know, exactly. Can't blame anybody, actually. Not the elephant's fault, not the person's fault.
No, exactly. It's one of those situations. Absolutely. So we were talking about interactions that you've had with chimps and things like that. Has there ever been a time where you felt like there was more than one kind of almost like talking about you? When you get the feeling people are talking about you, you look over and there's two people like whispering and looking over. Have you ever had that with primates?
Yeah. If you do something funny, they will sit there and turn around and all look at you. Yeah, it happens a lot.
Does it feel like they're like kind of communicating to say?
You think so? Yes, exactly. Yeah,
again, we're anthropomorphizing. I know,
exactly. Yeah. I wouldn't write that in a scientific paper, but you definitely feel like they all of them are looking at you and they kind of all kind of probably saying the same thing or thinking the same thing.
Yeah. Well, this isn't a scientific paper, so you can say what you want. You can just talk about your beliefs today. We don't have to back it up with hard science every time, I guess. But I'd be interested to go a little bit further down that road and to hear a little bit more just about how they communicate and the level of communication they have. And I guess kind of subgenres in that would be like language and possibly even culture at a certain point, if they're able to communicate. So on what level and how deep is that?
Well, it's really hard for us to understand communication in other species. So I'll kind of start with that as a caveat. Everyone kind of can relate to a dog. How many words can a dog understand? Some dogs know over 120 commands, but we're trying to force our language on the animals, whereas they have their own language, but we don't really understand it. So it's really hard to figure out how well they communicate on a basis.
Yeah. Have you ever? Sorry, carry on.
No.
Have you like? Did you do much studying of that, like their language and communication, or is it just too? Yeah.
It was it's a topic that is really, really complex and so really hard to really delve into.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Well, I'm going to move on through a few different kind of things that have been burning in my mind to ask you about primates and chimps. So use of tools and potentially even like medicine and things like this. Can you talk a little bit about that? Sure. It doesn't have to be chimpanzees. It can be any primates that you want to refer to, but I'm just interested.
Well, there is quite lots of animals use tools. And there's birds that basically use thorns to get at insects. Chimpanzees, of course, have kind of a pretty elaborate, toolkit. I never studied it because the chimpanzees that I was working on, they were actually, some people called them the dumb chimpanzees of Kibale because they use very few tools. I think the reason they don't use tools is because they have plenty of food and they don't really have to. So, they don't use that many tools.
Yeah.
Medicinal plants is another thing. I think that's something that we're just starting to understand. And again, animals are doing it in a very subtle way, so it's really hard to figure it out. I'll give you kind of one story about kind of can follow it through kind of a scientific level. I was sitting there with one of my field assistants one day watching red columns, this endangered kind of mid-sized monkey. And he was eating the bark off of the stem, and he was kind of eating it like corn on the cob. He's kind of rolling it. But I swear he was making a face like it tasted bad. So I said that to my local field assistant. The local field assistant said, yeah, it tastes bad. And I said, well, how do you know? How often do you eat bark? And the reality was what they do is if they have a sore stomach, they take the bark of this tree and they make a tea from it. And so that intrigued me. So I looked it up, and it had certain compounds that might be medicinal. And so I spent a chunk of time just trying to find out about the tree. And it contains what's called a cytogenic glycoside. So it releases basically a cyanide when it's digested. And that cyanide can kill off basically stomach worms. So if you have lots of parasites in your stomach and you eat this plant, you basically can you can deworm yourself. And so what I did to kind of see if it was possible is I studied outside of Kibale, there's these small forest fragments. And some of those fragments have this species of plant and some don't. And the fragments with this species of plant, the monkeys have very few stomach worms. If they don't have this species of plant, monkeys have lots of worms. So it seems like they're eating the plant to get rid of the worms.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. And I wouldn't have known it. Wouldn't even thought to look at it. My field assistant hadn't said, yes, it's, tastes that bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And there could be plenty of others that you haven't, like, not you, but we haven't noticed and we haven't caught onto.
The only reason I cued in on that was because he was literally making a face.
Grimacing.
Yeah. And it was bark. If it was eating a leaf, I probably wouldn't have thought of it.
Yeah. But no, that's amazing. That's really cool. So they actually potentially do use medicine intentionally.
Yeah. There's some really good studies actually that do show that particularly chimpanzees use medicinal plants. They intentionally use medicinal plants. So a researcher from Japan, who's a good friend of mine, has studied that for his whole career. And it's some really nice research.
Wow. That's awesome. What about personalities in the primates and within the chimps, but also within, the other monkeys? I think you work mostly with red colobus monkeys, right?
Right.
So feel free to reference them at any point. But yeah, just interested to like how distinct different personalities can be, and like, is it basically like humans?
It's basically like humans. Yeah. Some animals, some individuals are just, oh, that's that mean one again. He's going to pick a fight. Other ones are just laid back. You get to know them as the personalities. So for the longest time, scientists shied away from talking about personalities. But now people are actually studying personalities. And so they're really looking at, why is there variation in personalities? So it's becoming a field of study that people are actually looking at to try to understand. But yeah, they have personalities.
Do you think there could be like almost some kind of, I guess it's not so much a personality at this point, but more like cultural differences between certain groups of primates? So like a kind of common personality trait maybe within this, I don't know if that's a good way of putting it, but yeah, cultural differences within the groups.
So the trick with answering that question is to define what culture is.
Yeah.
So if you mean two groups that have slightly different behaviors, then yes, for sure. Neighboring groups often have different behaviors. They eat different foods. In chimpanzees, some groups use tools a lot, some groups don't. So those are cultural differences, if that's what you mean by culture.
I guess it was kind of an open.
Yeah. Cultural anthropologists hate that simplistic version. But, it's kind of a basic term, a basic way of seeing things that I use. And then, yes, there's lots of differences.
Yeah. Wow. And what about mental health of, again, primates? Again, kind of, I'm thinking in my mind, I'm thinking of chimps when I'm asking these questions, but again, primates in general. I've read about that there's potentially mental health issues and even depression has been studied or seen in primates. Yeah,
I think, there's really good evidence with humans that, there are, basically chemical reasons for depression. So it's undoubtedly that you get the same thing in primates. It's really hard to, when do you say, a monkey that's up in a tree is depressed?
Yeah, it's hard enough with humans, I guess.
Yeah, and we avoid kind of that anthropomorphizing. Jane Goodall really early on described infanticide. So sometimes chimpanzees will kill other infants under certain circumstances, other chimpanzees. And she described a female who did it, and Jane was kind of bold enough just to say, I think she's crazy. So she basically said the one animal that was doing it was just, crazy, which could be true.
Yeah. I mean, we are primates and some of us are crazy, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What about like ethics, morality, that kind of thing? Have you observed much of that?
There are rules of engagement, rules with which you you don't escalate conflict too much. So it's really hard to say what is ethics, what is rules of morality.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm an evolutionary biologist. So I think if people have something, some trait, then animals will have some form of that trait. There's nothing truly unique about humans. There are things that we have taken to greater extent. We have a larger brain, we have much better language, but it's not truly unique. So there's probably the basis of ethics and morality in primates.
Yeah, and I suppose you could look at it the other way and say if you chuck a bunch of humans in the forest and strip away all the smartphones and computers and clothes and food that's in ready meals, things like that, then maybe we're going to lose a few of our ethics and morals.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of touched on this, but are they sentient? Are primates sentient? Do they have feelings and emotional intelligence, and can they feel empathy? All these kind of things.
Definitely. So I've seen kind of empathy being expressed in lots of different forms. So I once actually was in a public debate with a bunch of philosophers and religious people about, there's 600 people in the audience, about empathy. And they were saying that it was uniquely human. And I was saying it wasn't. So what I did is I described a situation that I saw, and I said, but I tricked my colleagues, I guess. Basically I said, if you saw a human cultural group and a human in that culture die, and the other people who were looking at the dead body, sat around the dead body, pushed it a little bit, sat there, left and fed, came back and sat there next to the dead body, would you think that would be a sign of empathy? And they said yes. And I just said that's exactly what chimpanzees do. So chimpanzees don't basically show signs of mourning when an animal dies. So do elephants.
How long can it last with the chimpanzees? Like, how long can they mourn for? Again, there's probably no definitive answer, but do you have any rough
I don't
speculation?
For chimpanzees, but for elephants, they will repeatedly come back to a site months later. So there'll just be bones there, and they'll come around and they'll stand for hours, just kind of shuffling the bones around, move the bones around. So I think it can last for months.
Amazing. What about the red colobus monkeys that you work with? Do they kind of show the same characteristics? Like, have you seen empathy and different kind of emotions in them?
You see things like if an animal gets wounded, another animal will come over and they'll be grooming. So, but it's a little bit harder to tell with red colobus monkeys. They're more distantly related. But there's some really great film footages of dogs showing empathy to other dogs. So there's all these YouTube videos of basically dogs, an animal, a stray dog has been hit on the road, and other dogs will basically come and stand by the dead animal, the dead dog. So there's all sorts of really good signs that animals mourn.
Yeah. How intelligent do you think they are? Like, obviously each species may have a different level, and it's impossible to quantify exactly how clever they are. We can't ask them to complete a test or anything like that, even though a test wouldn't necessarily give us the answer. But do you have any, again, like feelings or speculation on what they could be capable of? Because I saw something in one of I think it was one of your lectures, where there was a video of a chimp trying to like touch a box on the screen, and it had like numbers in ascending order, and it would flash up for a few seconds or a second and then disappear, and the chimp would have to touch where the boxes were in ascending order of the numbers, and he does it so quick. I think it was like faster than this grad student they had on the other side, and like there must be more things they can do that we.
I think so. That's a great example. That was a beautiful study done in Japan. And the chimpanzees can memorize the order of the numbers. So they can, the number will flash up, you get a screen, it'll show you the numbers, like 1 to 7, and the animal then has to hit, the numbers disappear, but the box is still there. And the animal has to hit 1, 2, 3, all the boxes in the appropriate way. And they can do it amazingly well. They can do it better than we can.
Yeah.
It's really, really amazing. There's all sorts of great examples of animals having kind of memory, so spatial memory of where food is. So, for instance, I studied howler monkeys, which is a leaf-eating monkey, which are not supposed to be too bright. for a couple of years in Costa Rica. And every year at about the same time, within a couple of days, the group would leave their normal home range, travel about a kilometer, and basically end up in a small grove of trees that had come into fruit. And then they wouldn't go back there for another year. So they remembered where the food was. They also knew the time that they had to go to that food source. So, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that is amazing. What do you think would be the smartest non-human primate? Or do you like not compare them too much? Do you just think like kind of they each have their own strengths?
I think they each have their own strengths. It's hard to put things on a common test. So, they all have different kind of strengths.
But the most similar potentially to humans would be chimpanzees and
Yes.
what the other great apes or
the other great apes. All of them show great abilities with learning spatial things, with all sorts of different ways of doing it. Originally it was thought that orangutans were not very smart, but all that really was is they hadn't been studied enough. And as soon as we'd studied them more, we realized that they actually were pretty smart. So it's just really hard to figure out a scale of comparison.
Yeah. And obviously we have to define intelligence as well, which is in itself hard enough to do. My last guest, Paul Watson, he said to me during our conversation that animals, I think specifically a cockroach and another one, it was a funny story, but he said animals, in his opinion, are cleverer, more intelligent than humans, simply by the fact that they're managing to live in harmony with their ecosystem. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that? Do you agree?
Not really. Animals can live in harmony, and often it's when their numbers are at appropriate levels, but also they can, overgraze their environments. So elephants are a good example. Elephants will, on some circumstances, eat the trees in their habitat so much that they kill all the trees. So they kill their food sources. The red colobus monkeys I study they simply love certain foods, and so they eat the young leaves off the tree time and time again. Well, if you do that to a tree enough, you kill the tree. And so they're literally decreasing the abundance of their favored trees in the environment.
Some human qualities there.
Yeah, I think, it all depends on kind of how the population numbers are.
Yeah.
Humans are basically, there's way too many of us.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that later. Are there too many? But there you go. You've answered it. I think I think it's quite clear to see that anyway. We talked about some of the amazing behaviors and stuff you've witnessed, like being false charged and stuff like that. But are there any others that jump to mind? Any other amazing kind of behaviors in the primates that you've witnessed personally?
Oh, off the top of my head.
Putting you on the spot.
I know. I think the one thing that I think is really amazing is the fact that they can remember where food resources are. So they often will make these beeline directed movements to a tree that you haven't seen them go to, or to a different area, and lo and behold, there's a food resource there. So they seem to have great spatial memory of where food is.
Yeah, it is amazing. So you said you're an evolutionary biologist. Where could chimps be in 50 years? Like what kind of they're still evolving, I assume. So what kind of changes are you seeing, or are we seeing over the last 30 years and going forward over the next 30 to 50? What might happen?
So for evolutionary perspective, you got to think about longer time frames. So you got to say 50,000 years, because you got to go through lots of generations. So, right now things are changing so fast that it's really hard to say, what the environment chimps are going to be living in. But, probably right now, some of the animals, like some of the monkeys, are evolving to be able to live on poor quality foods because they're just found in small forest fragments. So they don't have many options of what to feed on. So there's probably selection for that.
Yeah. Maybe the question I should have asked you, maybe the question I meant to ask you was, in 50 years, what new things do you think we will know about primates? Like what kind of greater understanding do you think humans might have of non-human primates? Is there anything you think this is the next discovery and it's waiting to come out and just wait till somebody proves it?
Well, if I could answer that question, I'd be a really great scientist because would know exactly what to do. Um, we have all sorts of great new discoveries of how animals eat, how they, their microbes in their stomachs digest, change. Um, I don't think I can answer that question.
No, fair enough.
Yeah.
No worries. What, in your opinion, like makes us different, and in your opinion, what makes us similar or the same as other primates, particularly the great apes, I suppose?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think because I'm more on the ecological side than most anthropologists, I don't think we're that different. So people always say how different people are, how unique humans are. We have some differences. So we have a great use of language. But, you could say chimpanzees are unique too, because they can climb trees much better than we can.
Mm.
So, each species, almost by definition, is unique in some ways.
Yeah.
Humans are unique in our ability to destroy the planet. Those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But I think each animal, each species has its own value. And, we're not all that different in many ways.
What do you think are the consequences of people's desire to call themselves unique from or different from animals and other people?
That's a great one.
Yeah. You recognize that one?
Yeah. So people like defining us versus them. So we like to say humans are unique. Humans are different from animals. What does that allow us to do? Well, it allows us basically to say we're superior. That's the implication of it by saying we're unique. We have a bigger brain, we have better language. So if we say we're superior, that gives us justification for putting down animals because they're not as good as we are. We have to come first. But we do that in all sorts of different ways. We form categories in all sorts of different ways. So for instance, we often form categories based on race, based on gender, based on religion. And all those categories allow us to put down the race, the gender, the religion. And so things like religious wars are based on the desire for humans to make these categories, us versus them. So I think we should try not to make categories like that.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely do it amongst ourselves as the human race, and that's clear to see, like you say, with religion and lots of other, we find more ways to separate ourselves and to feel our similarities sometimes. But with animals as well, I suppose it's kind of the step towards where we are and what we're doing to the environment. Mm-hmm. It's making ourselves feel different to them and superior, like you say, and dehumanizing. Obviously, it's a weird way to look at it because they're already non-human. But it is kind of similar to dehumanizing and what people might do when they want to commit atrocities and things like that. Like, it's easier to dehumanize, and then it doesn't hurt so much because, but yeah, so do you think that's potentially a big part of where we've gone so wrong?
I think so. I think definitely is. And, I think it comes back to, basic primate behavior, us versus them, my group versus your group, those sorts of things. But, the one thing that we say is unique about humans, which is we're slightly different. We have a bigger brain. We can supposedly analyze things better. So if we can do that, let's analyze, our situation and make the wise choices about it.
Yeah, we've got the resources as well, which they don't have.
Yeah,
it's kind of on us, right?
That's what I think. Yeah.
So I would like to kind of lead into the conservation topic here. You're obviously an expert in that. Before we kind of talk about Africa and all that kind of stuff and wild animals, zoos, can they be a good thing? Is there a place for them in 2021 and going forward?
Well, I guess I could turn around and ask you a question. How many people in the US or Europe get the chance to go to a wonderful forest in Uganda or, wonderful tropical forest? Not so many. None. So I'm pretty pro zoo because they offer the opportunity for people to experience nature. And for people to support government policies to protect nature, for people to, donate to groups like World Wildlife Fund, they have to appreciate it. And how are they going to appreciate it if they've never seen it? So I really am a big supporter of zoos in many ways, and a big supporter of kind of nature films, etc. Worked with National Geographic for 9 years. So I think they do a great job at raising people's interest.
Mm. Yeah, I'm a massive fan of nature documentaries. I love that. But yeah, zoos, it just feels, it's like a controversial one, isn't it? Because obviously nobody likes to see an animal in a cage, just full stop. Obviously there's more to it. Nobody wants to see sad animals, and I'm anthropomorphic. Sad animals pacing up and down in their cage, and not being able to enjoy the freedoms that they should have. But like you said, there's the other side to it, and then there's the side of education and things like that. And I suppose if everybody grows up not having any idea what these things look like in person or anything like that, then I suppose it's harder to get people invested in conservation and similar things.
Right now, I can't remember, it was a decade ago or something, that basically more than half the world's population lives in cities. So people are not getting into nature. If you go to Uganda and ask them what's in their forests, some young children will say tigers, which of course are in India, they're not in Africa. Yeah. So I do think we need to have an education. So for zoos, I think it's their responsibility to make the cages nice, to try to protect the animals, to make sure you get the animals not from the wild, but from other breeding animals in zoos, that sort of thing. But I think it's a balance. And finding the right balance is always hard.
And with species like the very endangered and things like that, do you think there's merit in kind of captive breeding? I know it's never going to be the same, but is there merit in keeping species alive in a kind of artificial, it's not artificial, but you know what I mean by that, in a kind of man-made, so like our interfering, well, it could be our interfering that is ruling them out anyway, that's killing them off anyway. But yeah, any thoughts on that?
I think there is some value in it. But I think before we really spend tons and tons of money on captive breeding, we should really try to stop the animals from going extinct in the wild to start with.
Yeah.
Because if we basically have an animal that's just found in captivity, I think it's lost a lot of its purpose if it's just found in captivity for us to look at. It should be in the wild, doing what they do naturally.
Yeah.
So
plan A, save them in the wild. It's kind of like the Mars thing, like I think we should be exploring Mars and things like that. It makes sense.
Yep.
But at the same time, it should very much be plan B. Plan A should be fix the problem we've created here.
Okay.
And it's the same kind of thing. So in terms of conservation, then, these are a couple of stats or things. I think it was, again, a lecture that you did or something like that. Maybe not a lecture, maybe a Q&A or something like that. But extinction rates right now are 1,000 times higher than the background rate.
Yes.
That blew my mind. And then there was another one that's kind of similar, was that we're losing, I think, between 11,000 and 58,000 species annually.
Yeah.
Those are mind-blowing.
Yeah, they are mind-blowing. It's really hard to come up with those numbers. So, people argue about the numbers. Scientists always argue about things. But it doesn't really matter. You cut the numbers in half, it's still mind-blowing.
Yeah. If it's even in, remotely similar territory, then it's horrific. Even, the
amount of forest we're losing is just mind-blowing. So basically, I wrote down statistics. In about 18 years, we lost an area of forest the size of Madagascar. We're about the size of Texas, about the size of France. So, these are pretty big areas.
In what space of time did we lose that?
Between 2002 and 2019. Yeah. It's 60 million hectares, which is an area just larger than the size of Madagascar.
Yeah. And it's still continuing at the current rate, pretty much?
It's accelerating.
It's accelerating. Wonderful.
During that time, deforestation rates accelerate. Now is perfect time to talk about climate change, because everyone's saying we have to stop this. But, we're not showing any real signs of slowing down.
No. It's all about kind of making statements about, we're going to reduce this by X percent by X year down the line.
Yeah, exactly.
Which to me just sounds clearly like passing the buck. Like by that time I'll be long out of office and I won't have to deal with the the backlash and the problems. Yeah. And so we'll kick it down the road. Yeah. I mean, it should be, in my opinion, like they should be putting restrictions on things like we're going to cut this down by X% by next year and then by X% by the year after, and like exactly. a continual thing rather than just 2030. It's just such a cop out. So we said we're losing it between 11,000 and 58,000 species per year. I'm assuming, I'm kind of more than assuming, but I'm assuming for each individual one of those thousands upon thousands of species, the implications are far greater than just losing a species. So what would be the kind of greater implications of losing that number of species a year?
Well, animals have roles in environments. So they, basically have ecological function. So when you lose sets of species, you basically change the functioning of the environment. And that can cause deterioration in the environment. One of the great examples would be in Lake Victoria. So Lake Victoria is in East Africa, Uganda, as part of it. There was something like 350, maybe 400 species of small haplochromite fishes. And to increase fisheries production, they introduced a large predatory fish that grew to 60 pounds, which is a great way of getting a fisheries. But that predatory fish basically ate out a lot of the species of smaller fish and drove them to extinction. And those fish had roles like eating the algae, basically controlling the plankton levels. And so with those species gone, the lake water quality is really deteriorating. So that literally the bottom of Lake Victoria now is without oxygen and is not inhabitable by fish. So it has all these kind of cascading effects, and that's really can be really serious.
Yeah. So I suppose amongst those effects, there will be other species now being threatened because they have not got the same conditions they had.
Exactly.
Yeah. So when we're talking about 50,000 potentially lost a year, like the implications could be affecting millions potentially of species, or in some way or another.
In many ways, it's affecting everything because all the environments are being changed. And, it's not for the better.
I think that's the hard thing at the moment is everything is in every department. We're right on the edge, aren't we? We've pushed it right to the edge of where we should be.
Yep. That's kind of a doom gloom scenario, and in many ways,
I'm a little bit doom gloom. I need some optimism.
I'm an optimistic person. I've watched forests disappear, animals being killed. Seen chimpanzees going to the stew pot. But I think individuals can make a huge difference, and if a lot of individuals do their little part, we can make big differences. So I'm really kind of optimistic that now is the time for change, and people are starting to appreciate that, and we can hopefully start seeing some more significant changes.
What can people start doing? Like just people at home, like your average person. Are you referring to kind of your average person, or are you talking more about organizations and governments and things like that?
Well, both really. The average person has all sorts of things they can do. One of the most important things is how they vote. So, figure out how different, whoever you're voting for stands on environmental issues and vote for those, write your member of parliament or whatever, and kind of try to keep them on track. Make sure they're living up to the promises they set at the COPs meetings, the climate change meetings. You can vote with your back pocket. So you can vote with your wallet. So, when you buy things, make sure you're buying recycled, make sure you're buying it, kind of in the way that should be, the best for the environment. So, that sort of thing. And of course, you can get out and donate or volunteer. So everyone can make a difference.
I think it's become
how many people are basically today will use, 2 plastic bottles. We can try not to use drinking water from plastic bottles. That would make a huge difference to the world.
Yeah. I think it's been made harder, I think, for people, or it is quite hard for the average person, I think, these days, when in your average supermarket, at least in the UK or France or I guess America as well, the vast majority of products are just from all over the world, from far afield, totally unnecessarily as well. And so just by buying a simple packet of, whatever it might be, raisins or something, it's potentially coming from the other side of the world. It's in plastic packaging. it may have been used, like pesticides may have been used to grow it. And there's probably even more angles that I'm not mentioning, but it's made quite hard, I think. Like, it would be so much easier if supermarkets made, like, actually had a focus on like local produce and minimizing plastic. But I just feel like we're just not quite there yet, even though the scientists and everybody are kind of screaming it. It's just not quite happening. Like, there was that whole obsession with plastic straws, wasn't there? But allegedly that's like 0.03 or something % of the
really
plastic
small,
in the ocean.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think, that's a good example. So, you have a choice though. You can go to the supermarket or you can go to the farmer's market.
Yeah.
So there are options. You can kind of tell the supermarket store manager they should really push to have things that are more local.
Yeah.
There has been a huge movement lived in Berlin 3 years ago, and then here in the States for organic foods. So, buy organic, even if you pay more. So that means pesticides are not going into the environment.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And for your own health as well.
Exactly.
They don't want to be putting that stuff inside you.
You think of the cancer rate, and you wonder where cancer comes from. Where there's so many pesticides being used and things like that. It's not surprising we have high cancer rates.
Yeah, it's coming at us from every angle now, I suppose. They used to blame it on bacon, but I think it may be a bit more to do with plastics, pesticides, pollution, and things like that just as much.
Yeah, I just wrote down a couple of statistics, so I was just reading them from here. There's 2.3 billion kilograms of pesticides are used each year. And so that, I can't figure out what a billion kilograms is, but that's approximately the weight of 136,000 transit buses full of people.
That is insane.
Yeah. And let's go for
plastics. To go somewhere.
Exactly. For plastics, there's 402 million metric tons produced per year, which is the weight of 40 million buses loaded with people. And production is growing at a rate of 8.3% per year. The doubling time is only 9 years. So we're all talking about stopping these plastics. We're actually using more and more all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. People are talking about it, but while they're talking about it, there's massive factories making more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, whereas it's already absolutely everywhere. It's crazy to think, really, isn't it? Like how different, 100 years ago, plastic was not really a thing, right? I don't know when it was actually invented, but now it's absolutely everywhere. Wherever you look, you'll see something that's plastic.
Yeah.
And microplastics.
Basically plastics are everywhere. They really are.
I said to my guest last week, I said to Paul, they found now microplastics in fetuses, in human fetuses.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, if that doesn't set off alarm bells for everybody, I don't know what will, because that's terrifying.
The World Wildlife Fund just released a report last year, I think, which estimated the amount of plastics people actually eat. And so they say people eat 5 grams of plastic every week, 5 grams every week, which is the equivalent to eating your credit card. That's 5 grams.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I don't even know how to deal with that. It's just crazy. It really is. I mean, what effect is this going to have on us?
Yeah. But, I think we can't take the doom gloom scenario and say we can't do anything. The thing is to, basically try to do things about it. Try to, not buy plastics, try to do things more organic. All those things will make a difference. Yeah.
Yeah. We just have to try. I mean, I was going to say it's so hard to be kind of completely, zero waste, no plastics. It's hard to really fulfill that. But if everybody tried, tried and failed, but tried, we'd probably be in a lot better shape, I suppose.
Exactly.
So
it would send a message. Some businesses will start saying, okay, there's lots of people out there that don't want to use these plastic bottles. Let's provide alternatives.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's like some little shops and things that I've been to that or little supermarket chains that start to not have the plastic bags to grab to fill up with, loose fruit or nuts, and it starts to be paper bags or just no bags. But it needs to catch on and fast. I think people need to wake up and start doing something about it. Take me back to kind of the front line of conservation from your point of view in Uganda, in Africa, and what are the major problems faced out there, and how do you combat them?
Well, so I work in a park, so it's Kibale National Park. And outside of the national park, basically the population density is about 200 people per square kilometer. So it's pretty high densities. So, the park represents a wealth of resources. There's fuel wood in the park. There's bushmeat in the park. So basically, you can come in and they could hunt the small ungulates and take it home to their families. So that's the biggest issues that I have to deal with. And we often we need enforcement to be a deterrent. But I kind of think of myself. If I was a young farmer with basically hungry children, or I had to put my kid to school, would I go take things from the park? Well, yeah, maybe. Why not? You need to feed your family. So we really need to think of ways to help provide alternatives for people. Provide incentives not to take things out of the park. So I think that's where the biggest issues that I'm kind of dealing with now are.
What kind of animals would people normally take to eat from the forest? What is bushmeat typically?
It depends on where you're talking about in the world. So basically, in some places, anything's bushmeat. They'll eat small birds, they'll eat monkeys. Where I work, basically monkeys are taboo, so they don't eat monkeys. Popular things are small deer. The pigs, basically in the world, are getting hammered by people trying to kill them to eat.
So monkeys, that would have been hard for you, I suppose, if people had been trying to eat monkeys.
Yes. Then the monkeys would be totally scared of people. So I would never have seen them.
Yeah. Have you spoken to anybody out there, ever had a conversation with anybody that eats monkey?
Well, not in my area. When I worked in the Caribbean, I talked to people who ate monkey and put it in a stew pot.
What kind of conversations did you have? Did anybody kind of see your way of thinking, or are they just my food?
I think I would make it a parallel. If you're talking to a vegetarian, you often don't see eye to eye. And I think I wouldn't eat monkey, but hunters in the United States, they eat deer. So hunting wildlife is not necessarily a bad thing. Everything comes in different perspectives.
Yeah.
The big thing is, we have to make sure that the populations are, basically being sustainably managed, or we can't have people, in my perspective, killing endangered species.
Yeah. No, absolutely not. What are the most endangered species right now? I guess wherever you're specialized, like in Africa and things, you don't have to talk worldwide if you don't want to.
Well, in the park that I work in, I'll kind of go for where I have more experience. It's chimpanzees, the elephants, and the red colobus, and pangolins.
Wow.
But in my park, I shouldn't call it my park, sorry. In the park I work in, all those populations are doing actually quite well, because the park has been very successful at protecting habitats, at restoring habitats. So there's been some active planting in of native trees. And so all the species of primates and forest elephants are actually increasing. So it's a pretty good success story.
Yeah, that is good. How many chimpanzees have you got in the park there?
Oh, it's hard to estimate. Maybe 300 to 500, something like that.
Wow. And how big is it then, the Kibale National Park?
800 square kilometers.
So it's big.
Yeah. It's the only viable population of red colobus is found in Kibale. It's the only big enough population to survive. The rest are all very small. So that's why I studied red colobus a lot.
Okay. What's unique about the red colobus? I'm sure there's lots, but what's the first thing that comes into your mind?
Well, quite frankly, people always want really good academic answers. They're really fun to watch.
Yeah.
They form big groups, so there's always something happening. They're a leaf eater, so they don't run away. They don't travel too much, so you can actually follow them and watch them. So, there's a non-academic response. They're just really fun to watch. They're really kind of active species.
Yeah, entertaining.
Yes, exactly.
It's a good answer. I don't want anything too academic or you'll lose me, you know. So we talked a little bit about loss of forest. Talk to me as well about the loss of biodiversity. Is that happening where you are or not so much in the national park? Is there kind of big palm oil things going on there or not so much in your part of the world? But talk to me about that stuff.
Well, again, it's tremendously variable between different parts. So literally last week, I had a friend send me up some aerial photographs that were done in the 1950s of the park. And so I was looking at the aerial photographs. These are, 65-year-old photographs, something like that. And all the area outside of the park was already turned into agricultural land. So for this area of Uganda, there are kind of no kind of current clearing of big areas. If you go to West Africa, basically West Africa, the Ivory Coast went from an area that 20 years ago had quite extensive forests and now has basically nothing left. And all that's been turned into palm oil and chocolate, cocoa.
Yeah. Because what they do, right? They correct me if I'm wrong, but they'll just deforest. They'll cut down a whole load of trees to create a massive area, and then they'll just plant a whole load of the same plant, be it palm oil or coconut or whatever. And then that will have a devastating effect on the animals and species of plant or whatever else locally.
They'll either do that, or what they often will do is they'll buy agricultural land. So huge chunks of Africa is actually owned by oil-rich countries or countries that have a lot of capital but few abilities to produce food. So they actually own this land. Those countries will come in and they'll buy lots of agricultural land off of people, and then those local people basically then have to go clear more forest to get more agricultural land. So it's a bit of a vicious circle. And palm oil and cocoa are kind of big culprits, but they're often not buying their actual rainforest, they're buying agricultural land. But we're still also logging huge sections of forest.
Is that something else people should look for, palm oil, in ingredients, and try and avoid buying palm oil?
Yep. Yeah. One thing about that is it's not very well labeled. So you're actually using lots of products with palm oil, but you don't know it.
Yeah, so some of them just call it vegetable or something like that.
Exactly.
Right? Vegetable oil. Yeah, it's bad. I don't know why there's not more regulation in terms of you have to say exactly just what's in your thing. I've noticed as well, the more me and my partner started to look into these things recently, some products don't even say where they're from. They just say things like from the EU or from one of these following countries and things like that, or not even anything, which is quite unsettling to be honest.
And you also think nowadays when you buy anything other than a food product, it probably has products that are made from 10 different countries put together.
Yeah, almost definitely. Talk a little bit about the union or the relationship between local healthcare and conservation, because I know that's something we've touched upon, but I know that's something you've been heavily involved with, and I know it's a fine balance, because if we're all about the animals and the conservation, then people are going to suffer, and if we're all about people, then animals are going to suffer. So talk to me about it.
Well, I got really interested in the idea that there could be a union between healthcare and conservation. Almost probably 2 decades ago. And it happened in a funny way. I've been out watching monkeys, and I was coming back with my field assistant, and I was just kind of tired. We were walking along the trail, and I was thinking, hey, let's talk about what I could do for the local community. So I asked him, what can I do for the local community? And he said, well, you can give us money. I said, well, I don't have very much money, so I can't do that. He said, well, give us jobs. And I said, well, to give you jobs, I have to have money. I can't do that either. And then what he described as something that is akin to healthcare. He just had a young son, and he basically said, well, if I come home tonight and my son's sick, I'm going to say, okay, I don't have money now. He's going to get better tomorrow. And so he's going to basically not take him to the doctor. Next day, he'll put it off again. And the third day, he'll take a day off work, lose pay, run around his neighbors trying to get enough money to go to the hospital. And what he was really asking for was some sort of kind of local health services. And so what we did, kind of a group of us, lots of really energetic students, we got behind this and we raised money to build a clinic. So we built a small health clinic, staffed it with a nurse, got all the kind of medical supplies we needed. The Ugandan Ministry of Health was really helpful. And we opened a clinic that the local people can come to. And that's been operating now since 2006. I was actually kind of proud of myself, thought, hey, I did a pretty good job. I was talking to one of the Park Service people, and he said, well, yeah, but that you only are helping people that can ride their bicycle here. How about the rest of the park? So he kind of deflated my ego quite significantly. So what I did is I said, okay, let's help the rest of the park. So I wrote a grant to buy an ambulance, which now is basically traveling around the park, providing healthcare to all the villages all the way around the 800 square kilometer park. But in addition, the ambulance basically, at the end of the day, people are still hanging around the ambulance, the mobile clinic, because they put on loud music and all the kids are dancing and they make it a really fun atmosphere. So at the end of the day, the Park Services basically talks to the local community about conservation, and they listen to local communities' grievances with the park. So it's kind of this union between provision of healthcare, which we can do for lots and lots of people. So we gave healthcare pre-COVID to 16,000 people a year, and the conservation messages went out to about 200,000. So at a relatively low cost per person, we can really help a lot of people.
That's amazing. So the clinic, how many people has that seen so far? Any idea? I'm sure it's loads.
I could look it up, but it's loads. I know the mobile clinic is 16,000 a year. That's the one that has the biggest turnout. So
yeah. Was getting an ambulance to Uganda from Canada as easy as it sounds?
Yeah, it was about as easy as it sounds. Yeah, it was really difficult. But it was really, I had, again, the company I bought it for was a used ambulance. They got totally behind it. They did little fundraisers so that they, got used equipment and stocked the ambulance up. They handled all the shipping. I had to arrange all the shipping and the importation and everything, but they were just really great. And so cool. They shipped it to Kenya, to Mombasa. We then had to go to Mombasa, pick it up and drive it across the country and get it in the country. But it all worked really well.
Yeah. Is it like a 4-wheel drive ambulance? Is it like set up for potentially more difficult roads?
No, it can't go to some of the villages. We definitely could use another one. That's for sure.
Yeah. Is that on the agenda?
It'd be nice to be. Yeah. Raising money for these sorts of things is really, really difficult. And we raised money for the actual clinic through a bunch of fundraisers, which the students help run. But now that it's up and running, people don't want to pay the running costs. So it's really difficult year after year to get the money to keep it going. But we'll keep it going.
Yeah, I hope so. So this clinic, what kind of things does it treat people for, and do they have to pay for the treatment?
It's subsidized payment. So it's basically free payment, a free visit to the nurse. So we pay the nurse's salary. So the visit's free, which is normally the most expensive part. But then we treat things like malaria. We do free AIDS testing, provide free AIDS medicines. We do vaccinations. So right now we're really geared up to do COVID vaccinations, and we're doing about 200 a week, which is the maximum number of vaccines we can get. We do family planning. Family planning is the biggest turnout whenever we can raise money to do a family planning clinic. Those are really, really popular. To do those, we need a doctor present, so we actually have to get extra money that can be run by the nurse. We treat minor cuts and injuries. We do all of kind of the vaccinations. We do deworming. We give out vitamins, and a lot of the medicines is actually provided free of charge from the Ministry of Health. So we're just providing a conduit to get the material. Yeah. So that works quite well. That's and we've done all sorts of funny, drives to basically have students donate mosquito nets and giving out something like 1,500 mosquito nets to the local community. Nice. One of the most funny efforts was the students decided that they needed basically family planning more. And so one of the students was basically working at a clinic, and they got something like 10,000 condoms. And then the other students got behind it, and we basically had 15 boxes of condoms that we sent over. And that was quite successful. British Airways paid for the air freight. So
nice. Yeah. And so it's funded now, like year on year, it's funded via fundraisers and just continual
fundraisers, private donations mostly. And then each year I write a series of grants. So a foundation here in the States is helping this year. It's called the Porter Foundation. So we got grants to help kind of extend some of the vaccination work this year through that. But every year it's kind of lots of private donations of $100, $200, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Wow. That's really cool. And have you seen a difference in people's attitudes then towards the park and towards the animals and towards conservation?
So I'm an academic, so of course I studied it. And so, yes, we've actually shown that people's attitudes have improved. They think the park is a better place.
Yeah.
And one of the neatest things about it is when we started the clinic, a lot of people, there's about 12%, something like that, people that didn't like the park. And then after the clinic, that proportion disappeared. So people stopped hating the park.
Yeah.
And generally, more people liked it, but it was probably the people that hated the park that are doing the negative things.
Yeah. And they became neutral. They became still annoy me about this, but they helped out my cousin and stuff. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. That's very good. And is that kind of commonplace now? Do lots of national parks do this kind of thing, or is it not common enough?
It's definitely not common enough. It's really hard to organize, hard to do year after year. And so, all academics are too busy. They have to teach, do research, write grants.
Yeah.
So it's hard to do everything.
Yeah. Because when you're there on behalf of the university, right? Or are you there? Yeah, you are. But setting up this clinic and this ambulance, was that off your own back, or was that the university partly that were like, oh, we'd like to do this, or is that you?
It was basically off our own back. The university helped. So they accepted the grant money that I brought in. So they helped. But, it was, so it was all kind of our own work. So this year I wrote 16 grants. So you have to do a lot of grant writing, a lot of work to try to keep it going. But we've done it now since 2006. So
yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah,
it'd be great if that could be more commonplace. So is there anything else about the clinic and the ambulance that you'd like to share?
Just I think one thing that I kind of started to realize, kind of getting to know the people by meeting people at the clinic or going on within a mobile clinic, is that when you talk to people, in general, people have a pretty good attitude about nature. There is a general appreciation of the value of nature. If you talk to a poacher, the poachers really like the forest. They think it's really good things. So I think one thing we need to do with both the clinic, mobile clinic, and work that I've done at schools is really, kind of tell people, build that kind of respect for nature, build that awe for nature. You talked about the nature films, your documentary film, those sorts of things really, really help.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's been some really good ones recently on Netflix. I can't remember the names and things like that, but they're starting to include like the actual what we're doing to nature and how dire the situation is and that kind of thing. So people need to watch those as much as they can.
Yeah, I agree.
So before I start to kind of ask you some more miscellaneous questions that are going to be a little bit all over the place, do you want to leave some final thoughts on kind of conservation and animals and just that whole situation, the environment, wherever you want to go with it, but just anything else you want to get out that we haven't touched on or that we've touched on that you want to go into more detail on?
Well, I think I'll just kind of revisit something, and it's a bit of a corny statement, but everyone can make a difference. So I know you think about things like climate change, and you think about how am I going to save the climate, but we can all make a difference, and I think if everyone tries to make a difference, it adds up. So
yeah. And like we said, it's a lot of hot air coming out of political circles. So I think it may well be down to the individuals, right?
Yep.
The people, the average Joes, the average
I
people.
agree.
It's unfortunate, but it's true. Okay, so let's move on to just a few kind of random questions to round us out.
Sure.
I don't know how long we'll take, but I want to start off by just saying, were there any other charities that you work with, either at home or in Africa or anything like that, or that you don't have to work with, but any charities that you wanted to talk about or to mention?
Well, I kind of work with a couple of different charities that work with nature. So most closely, I work with New Nature Foundation here in the U.S. And they help with a lot of education projects, and they're the group that kind of takes donations to the clinic. I work with a group over in Uganda. It's a Uganda-based group, Uganda Conservation Foundation, and they're great, and they facilitate a lot of good work. There's lots of great people out there trying to do things. So those are kind of the two bigger ones.
Cool. If you send me the links to those after, I'll make sure they're in the description. So anybody listening or watching this can kind of scroll down and find links to those. Have you ever met Jane Goodall? Random question. But,
sure. Yep. I had a dinner with her once, 1990. There was 5 of us for dinner, and we kind of sat around the table and had a nice dinner. So
cool. How was that?
It was just fun. Yeah, she's a very amiable person, really nice.
Yeah.
We were talking about conservation strategies, and I was all for saving parks. She was all for protecting animals, particular individuals. So we had different perspectives, but she was great. Yeah. A few years ago, I was invited to give a talk on chimpanzee conservation at an international meeting. And so I said, oh, okay, I'll do it. And then to my chagrin, I was giving the talk, and who's sitting in the front row? There's Jane. So, what am I doing up here talking about chimpanzee conservation? You should be giving this talk. But she is an amazing person. She does some really great work, and she's a very nice person as well.
Yeah. She seems kind of like Mother Nature, right? Just like if Mother Nature could be epitomized in a human, it would be it would be Jane Goodall. So I watched an interview with Jane Goodall and where they asked her about like Bigfoot and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm interested to ask you. I've been wondering for a while. Like, so Bigfoot, I think there's the Yari, the Chinese wild man, Yeti, Sasquatch, all kind of the same mythical figure. Firstly, is it possible that there's a big primate type creature that we haven't officially noticed, or could there be anything in these stories, or could it be like historical that it was once something and now it's not and it's just been passed down? Do you think there's anything to any of it?
Yeah, I guess I'm too much of a scientist at heart. I'm too skeptical. I think we would have found it, particularly if Sasquatch was in the Rockies. There are too many hikers. There would have been everyone carrying a cell phone. There would have been a great picture of one by now.
But maybe he's terrified of humans, terrified, and maybe he's clever, and so he knows not to go near us.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, I like to think, I don't kind of read into Bigfoot too much, but I like to think, why could there not be another species of primate that we haven't discovered?
Yep.
Maybe not everywhere that it's reported, because like you say, some places are so run with people that you're going to know, but there may be some places that a large primate could be undiscovered still. I imagine there's still a few places on Earth that are not very well looked at.
We're describing new primate species, every year, basically. So we find, ones we haven't described before. So there's a new, it's controversy over it, but there's a new species of orangutan now been described. And so that's pretty big.
Do you know much about them? Do you know how different they are to regular orangutans or the ones we know about already?
Well, not too different by appearance, but the difference different in size and kind of facial morphology, but I don't really know. Going back to Yeti and Bigfoot, maybe there were ones 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know. I always love the adventure of them. We there's so much we don't know, so we should.
Yeah. Why not? How long ago officially did Gigantopithecus die out or evolve out?
No,
don't know.
Yeah, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. No, millions of years ago.
Because maybe it's some distant relative of Gigantopithecus or something like that.
Yep.
I hope there's something to it, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But that would be fun. But yeah, interestingly enough, Jane was quite open-minded with her response in the interview. I don't know if you've seen it, but if not, I'll send it to you later. I'll try and find it and send it to you. So tell me about this other time. It was again, I saw you talking about this very briefly. You touched on it, but there was a time where you were stood for 5 minutes, 14 meters away from an elephant. You didn't realize it was there until it charged you.
Yes.
And I just thought I had to ask you about that and hear a little bit more about that moment.
It was just a funny episode. We were cutting trails to census monkeys, and I had marked on, the 200 meter. I put the flag up, and then I heard something. I thought, oh, it must be one of the small deer. So I stood there and waited and watched and looked. Couldn't hear anything. The guys who were cutting the trail got up to me, and they stood and waited and watched. And then we watched this. Basically, the head of the elephant turned in our direction, and we saw the tusks and the ears and started flapping. And then elephants, when they're mad, their stomach gurgles. And so we were all going, okay, this is not good. And he charged. And so the field assistant ran one way, I ran the other way. And of course, the elephant followed me. But I ran downhill and I ended up in a swamp. And so I ran across the swamp, and the elephant was slower going through the swamp. So
Wow.
I think we just pissed him off. It was it was a male, so maybe he was in musk. But it was.
How long did he chase you for?
It seemed like hours. Probably, probably 5 minutes, maybe minutes.
Probably less. I mean, even a couple of minutes would be a long time to be chased by an elephant.
Yeah, I know it was over 200 meters because I went, ran back down the trail.
Yeah, so, wow, that's
what's so
where
amazing
was that rank?
I didn't see him, and he was 14. We went back later because I dropped my measuring tape, so I knew exactly where I was, where he was. So I went back later and measured how far he was.
Was it the dark, or is it just thick?
It was just thick bush
leaves and Wow. Yeah. So you think he was just standing there for quite a while, being aware of you,
getting pissed off at us being
gradually being like, I'm going to tell him in a minute.
I'm going to go. Shut up. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Oh wow! And so, how does that rank compared to your getting false charged by chimps and things like that in terms of the fear?
The fear factor was pretty high then. Yeah.
Scarier.
Yeah.
Is that your scariest moment interacting with animals?
Well, that, or I once got kind of chased by a lion. I was kind of close to a car, and basically I didn't see the lion either. And then he kind of started, running towards me. So I, jumped in the back of the truck. And once I was in the back of the truck, he didn't do it. But
yeah, how close did he get?
Oh, after I was in the back of the truck, he stopped. So then he was about 10 meters away. But I've seen a bunch of the large cats. So mountain lions in Canada, leopards, so cheetahs.
Like close interactions, close encounters with mountain lion in Canada, and any other kind of anecdotes you want to share?
The mountain lion, I think I scared him more than he scared me. We both ran in opposite directions. But
what about in Africa? Any other kind of interactions or memories of things that happened with any of the primates that you work with, or any other animal, but more specifically primates?
In many ways, we try not to, disturb the environment much, and we're kind of part of it. But here's a good example of how much we're part of it. So one day I was watching the red colobus with my field assistant, and there was an animal that the mother had made a big leap across the canopy, and the juvenile was kind of coming after the mother. And you could just see it going, "Can I make that leap?" And kind of look at it and walk back in the branch and run to the end and check it out. And he did this a few times, and I was just kind of watching, kind of laughing away. And then what he did is he jumped from the tree down onto the field assistant's head and used the field assistant as a springboard to get back up in the tree.
No way.
Yeah, so that was fun. We're just part of the forest.
Yeah, they're quite. Are they quite habituated with you guys?
They really are. Yeah.
Would that be? I'm assuming it wouldn't be the same for all the animals in your area, or
no. With this group, it's taken 20 years to get used to it. So
yeah, but they are now largely habituated. That's
some of those infants have grown up with us. They basically, when they were infants, they were watching us blow, so they get used to it.
again, I know I'm getting back into talking about this now, but just to ask you another quick question about when you're studying them, like what's the average kind of distance you're going to sit and like sit away from them, like a group of the primates while you're studying, observing?
Well, when we're observing them, they're kind of usually up in the trees. So they're 10 to 15 meters up, and we're usually 10 meters away from that. So usually quite a distance. And we try, if they approach us, we back up. So usually we're ways away. But, they'll sometimes come down and sometimes they eat soil. They'll come down and they'll be very close.
And have they ever kind of been really interested in stuff you've got with you, like papers or technological items or anything like that?
I have a great photo. I'll send it to you. Basically, there's a picture of a black and white Kibale monkey, and he has his hands on the keyboard of a computer. So the computer people were using the computer out of the front area, and he basically went down and I'm sure they were thinking, what are these people doing looking at this? And he just literally has his hands on the keyboard.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I watched from a few years ago one of these talks you gave, and you said, well, people were asking you to admit that animals have feelings and admit like your dog's happy to see you and things like this. And you said like scientists are afraid to admit things like animals have feelings. They're scared to say it. And you went further to say the reason they're afraid to say things like that is because they're afraid of the ridicule. They're scared of being ridiculed by their peers. And I just thought that was really fascinating because it's definitely something that happens, not just in science, I imagine, maybe more in science, but it's something that happens in all walks of life. People will be afraid to say something that goes against what the masses think, or what the common accepted idea is of our worldview, or however you want to think about it. But I thought it's quite limiting, isn't it? It kind of puts a limiter on science, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's not good, is it?
No, I think you're right. We agree. I think scientists are often want to do what's the norm, what's agreed upon. And, let's explore, let's do wild ideas. We're always afraid of being wrong. And we shouldn't be, because science is a process of learning. And to learn, you're going to make mistakes. So scientists always say that you don't want to publish a paper and get it wrong. I'm really proud of a couple of papers that I published that say, Chapman 1999 got it all wrong. So I made a mistake. I made the wrong interpretation, and you learn from mistakes.
Yeah, but it's about, I think, it's important to not have the ridicule and things like that, because obviously, if we look back through time, there's been lots of great minds that say things that have been ridiculed that have then been proven to be true, and we surely can't be naive enough to think that the worldview, the paradigm that we live in is going to be exactly the same in 100, 200 years. It's going to be like all the physics are going to be the same. All the, I find that hard to believe. And it made me pique my interest when you said that about the fear to say animals have feelings because of the fear of ridicule from peers. And it made me think immediately of the UAP kind of topic. I don't know whether you followed much of the recent developments and things like that. But it's something that scientists are now starting to slowly, be more open to talking about it from the point of view of it's clearly something happening. Let's investigate it. Let's try and find answers to it. Let's talk about it and let's have dialogue and things like that. Let's look at it scientifically. And that's starting to happen now. I think Avi Loeb of Harvard is doing the Galileo project, which has got loads of scientists on board with that, trying to study this phenomenon. And I thought it was interesting. I drew that comparison in my mind because it's been for so long something that's been heavily, heavily ridiculed, and it's still ridiculed, but it's becoming less. Have you followed it at all?
I haven't.
Anything to do with this? No.
I'm a huge science fiction fan, so I kind of just went, "Oh yeah, they're out there sometimes." So
yeah. Well, what are your thoughts then on potential extraterrestrial life? Do you have thoughts on? You must think about that sometimes. It's a fascinating topic.
I guess I think it's rather probably naive and rather kind of self-centered if we think we're the only life that ever is out there. How many planets are out there? How many So why not?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's just, it's obviously incredibly hard to speculate on without, like we said earlier with your primate study, without being anthropocentric.
Yes, exactly.
Because, we have no concept at all. In fact, we have probably more understanding of how a chimpanzee thinks than how anybody from off our Earth would think. But I love the topic personally. Are there any topics out there that could be considered like unscientific that you have a kind of interest in, that kind of always grab you, or that you think, oh, there might be something to that, although I know I can never prove it, like things like that?
I think, as you say, we should really be thinking of almost any topic should be considered scientific in some way. So, yeah, I really am fascinated with the possibility of life, other sorts of life forms, and kind of that is really intriguing. What they would be like. So, if you kind of think of intelligent species. I kind of try to paint pictures in my mind of what would an intelligent species be like if it evolved from a hawk. How would you talk to a species that evolved from a sit and wait predator, something like that?
Yeah.
So I think we should just be really open-minded.
Yeah, I think so. Another topic I'm fascinated by, and again, it's not really big in science circles, but I'm hoping, and it seems a certainty, that it will grow in that area. Life after death, which is all kind of linked to consciousness and stuff that we said about before, potentially. But yeah, I think that's got to be the greatest mystery of our species, and it doesn't feel like there's much science. I mean, I know there are some scientists that study that, and I've seen some fascinating things, but yeah, it should be more, I think, mainstream and more. We should be committing more money to try and look into that.
I think we should think about all sorts of possibilities. If someone has a good way of looking at it, great. But
yeah, absolutely. This has been amazing, Colin. To wrap it up, I'm going to ask you if you've got any kind of message that you want to give to people watching or listening today. They could be words of wisdom, it could be sage words of advice, it can be inspiration, or it could just be anything. It can just whatever you want to say to anybody that might be listening. No pressure.
No pressure. Okay, I'll give you two things. First is to repeat.
Perfect.
And that repeat is, the world is in dire straits, but everyone can make a contribution if they try. So everyone should be making their own little contribution. A lot of little contributions go a long way. And the second one kind of goes to kind of more of a career choice. So as a university professor, I talk to a lot of students, and they always ask me what kind of career path should I take? And really, one thing I always followed in my life is basically, I just say, kind of do what's fun. Pick a career that you enjoy and follow that career. Don't do something you hate. And if you're doing something you hate, stop doing it and basically do something that's fun. So, those are my two little bits of thoughts.
Well, it looks like you nailed the second one, because it seems you seem to enjoy what you do.
I do. It is really good. It's a great life, and I've had some great adventures and a lot more still to come.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Colin. This was a lot of fun and fascinating.
That's great. Well, thank you. It was fun chatting.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
Okay, right. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with the immense Colin Chapman. I hope you enjoyed the episode. To help Colin continue to help the people and animals of Kibale, please donate any spare change via the links in the description. If you want to help this podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. Be nice, be happy, be cool.